U.S. History? I hope you liked The Ghosts of Mississippi. I know that one is not so much an action-packed, like thriller type movie, in the sense that maybe like Cinderella Man or Saving Private Ryan was, but I think it's a great story, and I love that I like courtroom dramas anyway, and I feel like that one, even though it is kind of a lower budget movie, that it's like a really long, really, really good episode of Law and Order, and it's even better because it's all based on actual events. And it seemed to me like I feel like I remember when this all hit, and Byron Dale Beckwith was convicted 30 years after the murder he committed, the murder of Medgar Evers, that civil rights leader. And I feel like at that point, it was a national news story, and it was like a moment of reckoning where the country was like starting to come to terms with that and confront and really turn over a new leaf from the racist past of like the Jim Crow era. Okay. Now those laws had been off the books for quite a while, since the 1964 and 65 Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. But it takes a long time. Sometimes laws get changed, but in a place like Mississippi, it takes quite a while for that cultural change to permeate and really affect a lot of average people. Now, how you saw Bobby DeLauder, his family get targeted, bomb threats, his car was vandalized, his kid got bullied at school. That's all true. He had kind of a rough go of it. He even kind of like broke up his marriage because his first wife was not a fan of him pursuing this case. So I don't think it was like a universally, loved and, respected type thing that DeLauder was doing that. From my perspective, because I remember hearing this case play out. I was kind of in like upper elementary school and did like history and was in tune to that kind of stuff and even paying attention from a fairly young age. I feel like most of the country did like what DeLauder was doing and thought that justice was served in this case. But that's kind of from a northern perspective or from the western part of the United States that was more racially progressive than the deep south. I think the feelings, even in the 90s, were kind of split down in Mississippi. But in this case, I feel like justice was served. Now, since this trial, they have had other cases now that have been even further away, the conviction date for like the murder from the crime than this one was. But at that point in history, remember this is pre like DNA evidence, because the other cases I'm thinking of where it was 40 or 50 years since the time of a crime, they used DNA and forensic style evidence that way to get them, where DeLauder had to really do this like the old fashioned way and find all that stuff. And how crazy was it that the murder rifle, his dad, his father-in-law, who had been a judge and watched the first two trials, had actually just taken it and had it in his collection. Wow, small world. And that actually is a true part of the story too. Now, DeLauder getting that original court transcript because Hinds County had not done a good job of keeping all the evidence on file. That was huge that Myrlie Evers had kept that, because that was the only way they could keep witness testimony from the first two trials in the court in the new trial, because many of the original witnesses had passed away by that time. So he definitely went about doing it the hard way, and it took him years to build that case up. I know several points in the movie, it skips ahead multiple years, really, as they were building that case up and the evidence. It had to extradite him from Tennessee, too. So anyway, I think overall it's a pretty cool story. I don't have a whole lot more to say other than my last thing. The guy that played Byron Dale Beckwith, it's an actor named James Woods. I feel like for me, that was like the highlight of the whole movie. The way he talked in that movie, like the just rabidly racist things that that character said, or who's playing a real guy, Byron Dale Beckwith. I have seen a few interviews of Byron Dale Beckwith, and he was very outspoken. And I think James Wood hit it right on the head that was how that guy, that old timer kind of Klansman was. That was his attitude. And I think he actually even won an award or two for his portrayal of Byron Dale Beckwith. So even though he's kind of the villain of the movie and the bad guy, man, I respect James Woods, who's actually a pretty progressive guy that I don't think is racist at all, for playing that role, because that was a pretty important part of the whole story to get across to the audience. So I hope you like it. remember the reason they were able to do this trial. This is your little bit of your civics lesson here. In the Emmett Till murder, okay, when they tried those guys, it was not a hung jury. They acquitted those two guys, even though they were guilty. Once you've been acquitted, you can never be tried for the same crime again. There's a clause in the Constitution called the no double jeopardy clause. So you can't be tried twice for the exact same crime if you've been acquitted by a jury. Now, the two trials in like 1964 that happened for Byron De La Beckwith, you can see even at that point, from the Emmett Till time on to 8 years later or so when this all went down, even down in the Deep South where racism was kind of the norm, it had changed a little bit. Progress was being made because both of those first two trials were all white, all male juries, but they couldn't get the acquittal. If Beckwith had been acquitted at either of those first two trials, they would have not been able to run a third one. But at least one guy, and I don't know how many, but at least one juror on both of those first two trials, and maybe several, thought he was guilty, and that led it to being you had a hung jury. When all the jurors can't agree together, they call that a hung jury, and generally it results in a mistrial, which means there is no verdict. So then the state can run it again if they want. And that was a pretty abnormal thing because usually most murders, the trial will happen, even though there's no statute of limitations on it. Generally, the trial and conviction happens pretty soon after the murder, within a couple years. So for this one to happen 30 years later was kind of a remarkable thing. Okay, I hope you like it. If you haven't viewed all these yet, I'm assuming you have if you're watching this video, but get caught up on them over the weekend. And then I'm planning on doing some sort of an assignment or a little quiz that'll correspond to this movie coming next week. See ya.